So I've had a couple of weeks now to test 3ds Max 2012 out, and some of the new features and performance increases since 2010 and 11, and I've decided to make a brief review going over my favorite improvements and showing off some of the biggest performance increases. I'll probably skip a few things that Autodesk has shown in other videos, but these are the ones that stand out to me the most. The first I'll be going over is obviously viewport performance, which has skyrocketed since 2010 and 11. I've noticed it's the fastest version yet, even over 2009. Next I'll be going over editable poly performance and how that's seriously been revamped again. Next is stability. I've been using it now for 2 weeks and haven't had any crashes, even trying to make it crash. Next is the Mass Effects integration, which is just a revamped PhysX, but now fully integrated. One of the last things I'll be doing is showing, some of the more show-offy stuff like the Nitrous display types, soft shadows, the real-time occlusion, and things like that. And lastly, I'll just try and explain what your expectation should be going into it. Obviously, Autodesk hasn't improved everything, but the viewport performance alone has really, upped Max's performance. Thanks for listening. The two main display types you'll use in the viewport are shaded and realistic. In terms of production, you'll be using realistic for more screenshots, showing off models, or previewing lighting, things like that. For any modelers, you'll swap back to shaded while modeling. This is the fastest display type next to just pure wireframe mode. And after about a month of using the application, I'm in this mode 90% of the time, once you get over the appearance of the realistic viewport. But as soon as I need to show anyone anything, or as soon as I need to display anything, I'll swap it back to realistic. Shaded still has like full AA in the viewport, so you get really nice crisp lines no matter what. And this is what I'd use, just for modeling with. So it's extremely fast. Okay, next up is the realistic. This is the more fancy one with shadows and occlusion. And you can still model in this mode, but due to the way how it interactively renders the occlusion, it can get a little bit too noisy for your liking while moving stuff around. I'll just demonstrate. So you can just see the noise. It's a little bit distracting, but ultimately it still runs extremely fast. It's just saving the file, and you won't really hit any slowdowns unless you're working on like 1 million polygon plus objects. This object consists of how many objects? 227, and it's 5 million polys, or a bit over. The greatest thing about 2012 performance now is you don't hit bottlenecks in terms of the amount of objects you bring in. In 2010 and 11, you might have noticed you can import a certain amount of objects, and once you hit that level where your performance just drops, even if you hide everything else, things just continue to go slow. almost as if like it's just dragging everything down. Now you can get more realistic expectations. If you hide everything but what you're working on, it feels like that's the only thing you have in your scene. So next I want to show up is the pure wireframe mode, and people were kind of wondering why I hadn't shown that, and I'd just purely forgotten. But this is a few meta SL materials on. Let me just make this all consistent. So you can see I've kind of hit the limit here, and the performance is starting to get a little bit more slow. I can probably juke this up a little bit. Let me just... It's actually not going as slow as I thought it would. So I'm starting to hit a little bit of a slowdown here, but still going extremely fast. But if you, what's kind of invincible in Max 2011 is just the pure wireframe mode. So you can see here it's going as fast as, you know, anything really. Even on, it doesn't really matter how many objects you've got in the scene. If you go to pure wireframe mode, it goes ridiculously fast. And this is in realistic mode with full shadows and everything. Let me see if I can slow this down even more. Still going extremely fast. And like I was saying, I can just hide everything that I was previously working on, and everything continues to go extremely fast, as if that was the only thing in the scene. Let me just take this to the next level. And I'll check how many polygons are in the scene at this point. So there's 20 million polys now, and it's still going really fast. I'm sure due to the frames per second in the video it might seem a little slower, but for me it's going, you know, pretty much to like, yeah, I can't notice any slowdowns. The more zoomed in you get, the less it has to render, the faster it'll go. And you can see in realistic mode now we're starting to feel it a little bit. It wouldn't take long though to hit this limit in 2011. Now in terms of viewport speed, one of the major issues with 2010-11 was deleting and undoing operations on large amounts of objects. This is more of a, you know, core performance increase, but I'll just show you. This would probably be a bit of a nightmare to delete this many objects. Now I can just select them all, hit delete, and they're gone in a second, and the performance is back to being 100% for an object that you'd expect with everything else deleted. It doesn't leave anything hanging. Of course I can undo that, and it's all back. Takes a couple of seconds to click in, and then it's back going as fast as it was. Alright, next I'm just going to show you a scene with a bit of animation now. I'm not an animator, so get ready to see some pretty crazy stuff. Now, I'll be the first to admit I'm not the best to review any of the actual animation features, but in terms of just generally keyframing large amounts of objects, the viewport performance won't hang because of that. I'll just show you on this very simple scene. I wouldn't take too much from it, but just know that there's no like crippling bugs in terms of Max just going to a hang once you start keyframing stuff. So there's on this object, I think there's about 10 keyframes. Let me just set this back to 30. So realistic mode, like usual, it's the slowest. It averages between, it's going all over the shot, but it's extremely smooth. It doesn't go below 20, and it even hits up to around 80 frames per second. With everything in the viewport, it's kind of sticking around 40 frames per second. Next I'll just put on shaded. Shaded's roughly the same when animating, just maybe a few frames per second higher. Edge faces is the slowest, or in this case it's a little more choppy in spots, but it seems to go even faster. I don't understand that. And then there's just pure wireframe mode, and that's the fastest. That's averaging about 50 frames a second. So I'm sure you'll find ways to get Max to slow down in terms of its core performance, but the viewport doesn't seem to take a hit while doing any kind of, high poly keyframing. So the biggest thing in 2012 for modelers is obviously the returned performance of editable poly. And I mean, I shouldn't even really say return, because it really is. It has gotten, quite a bit better since 2009, 10 and 11. I don't even want to go there, but the biggest things for modeling is obviously being able to import large amounts of objects, interactively edit them with smooths on, convert from mesh to poly depending on what your needs are, and just overall reduce the amount of hanging you get like during certain operations. So I can show you editable poly. Let me just firstly import in So this is a new scene. I haven't really done anything. This is just the raw geometry. Now I'm going to put it onto shaded for modeling. Actually, firstly, let me just convert this to an editable poly. I've already shown this, but in 2011 it takes about 5 minutes to convert this mesh. In Max it takes, a few seconds. Okay, that's done. So everything's poly now, and I'm getting the same performance. So you're probably wondering how much can it take. Now it still does hit its limits, but that's not a viewport issue, that's more of a max core performance issue. But in terms of the crippling bugs introduced in 2010 and 11, they're well and truly solved. So I can slap on a couple of smooths on this mesh, and I can just happily edit, no worries. Just straight up editable poly modifying, this is the fastest version of Max yet. Hands down. Used it for about a month now, all sorts of different objects, and I can just yeah, honestly say it's it's the fastest version. Cut mode is extremely fast now, just updating the viewport. That was just really slow in previous versions. All the beveling and extrudes, they're really fast. Let me go a little crazy here, and I'll just slap on a turbo smooth onto most of these objects. So this object, I should say, already has one level of turbo smooth on it. I had to collapse it in order to add more detail to the model. So I'll just select most of these pieces and put a second turbo smooth on. You'd usually expect this to take a really long time. In 2012, it goes extremely fast, so it's done that now. Let me check how many polys. So we're at about 8 million at the moment. I'm just going to hide a certain area. So I can still edit this mesh extremely quickly. Symmetry mode goes really quick. So it's very hard to put yourself in a position to get things to slow down. I mean, like usual, you'll probably get there at some point. I've yet to really find any slow scenes. Just scenes behaving more slow than you'd expect them to. So I guess there really isn't much more to say. I mean, it's the fastest version yet. After a month of using 2012, I haven't had a single crash, crash to desktop producing an error report yet. So still at absolutely zero. And I've really tried to make it crash at times just for the sake of this review, and I still haven't been able to do it. So I mean, there really isn't much to say in terms of stability. Occasionally when you're doing large operations, Max will still hang for a little while, usually like in very small times compared to 2010 and 11, but Max can still take a while to do some operations. But in terms of actual bugs and crash reports, if you're a modeler, I don't think, unless you've got a configuration totally different to mine, which I can only speak for myself, I don't think you'll get nowhere near as many crashes related to modeling. So that's extremely good news. I'll just quickly go over the new UI and kind of what I think of it. Max for a while now has kind of had that very hardcore, lifeless look to it, and in 2012 they finally introduced a bit of color. And I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago I probably would have been against it, but when you learn more of the application and you start, needing to really, use more than what you can actually remember, you start forgetting what certain icons look like. It becomes really useful to have a UI that's a little bit more colorful and a little bit more easy to recognize certain tools. And 2012's done that. They haven't gone over the top. It's not like a full redo. The UIs are still the exact same, just apart from the color they've introduced. And so overall I really like it. I found it actually easier to find stuff and remember where things are, and the polyboost tools, or the graphite, whatever you want to call them, look pretty nice now. And so pretty much every single UI icon has been changed in the material editor. It's all swapped out, and yeah, overall it just looks a little nicer, a little cleaner, and it hasn't affected performance at all, so there's no complaints there. So I'd say, yeah, it's a pretty good addition. So in terms of integrated features in 2012, PhysX is the biggest. It's been renamed as MassFX, and in terms of plugins that were on the to-do list for integrating into Macs, I'd say this is on the highest priority. It's an extremely fast rigid body solver, and it does an extremely good job of just simulating very large amounts of objects. So I've just set up a very simple scene here, which I'll show you just how far you can push it before it starts hitting its limits. I've just got it on shaded mode. I don't really think it's necessary to put it on realistic for the sake of the simulation, but it still runs in interactive frame rates. I should note these are some pretty high-res objects that you're seeing in the viewport here. They are using a convex version of the mesh to simulate, but the actual geometry itself is quite high-res for what you'd usually simulate. So I'm just going to stop this and bake this to the viewport, bake this to keyframes, just so you can see how fast it will display this. And I'll just cut to when it's finished. Okay, so that's simulated now, and all these are in keyframes, and I can just show you just how fast. Just going to convert these to mesh, get rid of the modifier on top. Okay, I can just show you how fast the viewport displays this stuff. It's all real time. I can set it to shaded. and get extremely good feedback. Wireframe mode is pretty much invincible. Turning off shadows will increase speed quite a lot too. So yeah, that's Mass Effects, and it's running extremely stable and smooth in 2012. So the last thing I'm going to be going over is Meta SL and the realistic viewport, and I'm aware that Meta SL has been in for a couple of versions, but without the occlusion in the viewport and without the better shadowing and stuff like that, it just never really, I don't think, lived up to its potential. But now you can get some really nice look development happening straight in the viewport, adjusting kind of materials real time, figuring out what colors you want to use, stuff like that. Of course, it works interactively with the new shadowing. Let's create a spotlight here. It's all running relatively smoothly. Could be a little better, but I'm getting around 30 frames a second, between 20 and 30 frames a second. The more lights you add, the slower it will get. But for an object that's got about, there's about 8 million polys in the scene. There's 2 turbo smooths on every single piece here. It's with real-time occlusion and 3 lights casting shadows. It's behaving very nicely. So I've decided I'm actually going to provide this scene so you can kind of compare your performance also. So I've just got a little scene set up here just to show you the soft shadowing. It's a little bit of a fake, but for viewport performance wise it gets the job done. You can see the smaller you make the fall off field, the harder the light gets. I've just got overshoot turned on. So like in the viewport, it really feels planted. with the new shadowing and occlusion. You know, in previous versions it's very hard to get stuff to look like it's sitting on the surface. Now it runs really nicely. So after using Max for about a month now, I've come to the conclusion this is the fastest version ever. It's got the best speed, the best stability. It's got like a nice balance of new tools added that don't go over the top. The UI's had, quite a few improvements in terms of color. There's new UV tools that I didn't have time to go over, and quite a new features kind of under the hood that you'll figure out soon enough. Hopefully all the things I've gone over, kind of give you a good enough idea of what to expect in 2012. That being said, the main performance increase you'll see is from the viewport, but the actual core performance of Max can still be improved, even though that was never really, people didn't really complain about that anywhere near as much as the viewport. So that will kind of be the new bottleneck for you. I think the viewport will be less of an issue now than the actual performance of Max itself, which I personally don't have a problem with. Modeling wise, it's perfectly fine. You can do pretty much anything you want with extremely high res meshes, as I've shown, and combined with the new viewport lighting and stuff like that, it's going to become much easier to present stuff to clients, hopefully cutting out work in progress render stages and stuff like that when you just need to send them off a quick occlusion render or something like that. So yeah, I've spent quite a bit of time to produce this video. I know a few of you were waiting a little while for it, so sorry for the wait. But hopefully this gets you pumped up for 2012, which I think is going to be the best version of Max ever released, especially compared to 2011 and how bad the performance was in that. So thanks for taking the time to listen, and hopefully I can post up a couple of tutorial videos for modeling in 2012 soon. See ya.